So now I'm hoping that I can introduce our next keynote speaker, Kimber Lanning. She will give her talk entitled Living Locally Within a Globalized Economy. Kimber Lanning is an entrepreneur, business leader, and community development specialist who works to cultivate strong, self-reliant communities and inspire higher quality of life for people across Arizona. She is founder and CEO of Local First Arizona Foundation, a statewide leader in innovative local economy work. Since 2003, Kimber has worked to build stronger local communities that provide opportunity for all. It's a great pleasure to welcome Kimber Lanning.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you all for joining us here. This is going to be a great summit, and I am thrilled to be a part of it. So I am going to pull up my screen and share with you some ideas that I put together that I think will be important for you to be considering during your time with us over the next few days here. So I'd like to start by just thinking about living locally within a globalized economy. In this, concept, I think in today's world, a lot of times people tend to think that when we talk about local, we're anti-global, or that we talk about global, we're anti-local. And so our goal here today is help you think through how the economy works and what living locally like within the context of a globalized economy can look like. I like to jokingly say we're called Local First Arizona, not Local Always Arizona, not Local Only Arizona, but Local First Arizona. So given that, I'm going to walk through some really diverse array of concepts for you here today that I hope will give you an overview and glimpse into the things that you're going to be experiencing over the next few days. So we're going to be talking about why local, why should you care about the local economy, spending habits and how they can shape the outcomes, and not just shopping, but supply chain too. I think when somebody says, buy local, they forget that we're talking about sourcing as well as purchasing. Individuals, businesses, governments, all of us. And the important role that local businesses play. Local economies need deep partnerships. And so what can your role be in helping to deepen those partnerships? We're going to be talking about economic systems that are broken and what we can do about them. We know for sure that inequities across the country are widening, and we want to know what can be done about that. And so here we are looking at a quote from Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry is an absolute inspiration. He's a fantastic author. I highly recommend it in any of his books. And he is rooted deep in local economy work. So a good community ensures, remember this, trust, good faith, goodwill, and mutual help. And that really is the definition of a good community and a strong local economy. So why do we talk about local? So the first thing we're going to talk about today is connection to place. And the way we feel about our place and how we do business actually impacts our connection and our deep roots in the place where we live. And we're going to be talking about jobs and economics. And then we're going to be talking about resiliency. And, when I talk about economics, I think, most people, their eyes might start to glaze over. But I promise I will help you understand your role within an economy. Too often we turn on the nightly news and we think the economy is something far away from us that someone's going to fix for us, when in reality, we are the economy. So here we go. We're going to start with talking about Chicago. And why do I name Chicago? So Chicago has more hometown pride than almost anywhere in the country. And I pretty consistently joke, the Cubs lost for 100 years and didn't lose a single fan in the waiting and the expectation that they would once again dominate. Meanwhile, here in Arizona, we don't have a lot of hometown pride. 2/3 of us came from somewhere else. And therefore, the Arizona Diamondbacks, they have a bad inning, and we're not sure we want to commit, right? We've got more Cubs hats in our stadiums than we do Diamondbacks hats. So I grew up hearing people tell us about how great Chicago is. It's commonplace here. I don't know if that's true in Alaska, but really arguably more hometown pride than anywhere. So I thought, why is this? I was standing in line next to a woman, and we were complete strangers standing in line next to each other. And she starts telling me how great Chicago is. And I did a little internal eye roll because I was thinking to myself, oh, I've heard this a million times before. And then she leaned in and lowered her voice and sort of confidentially said, boy, you guys sure have made a mess out here in Arizona. And those are fighting words to me. I'm an Arizona girl, just like if somebody said something negative about your hometown, I'm sort of bobbing and weaving, and I'm ready to go with this lady. And I started thinking, she said, you guys sure did make a mess out here. And I thought to myself, she doesn't live here. And so I said, oh, you don't live here? She said, no, I lived here. I said, oh, you haven't lived here very long then? And she said, no, I lived here 15 years. So I said, well, who the heck is you guys? You're one of us now. If we have problems, you're part of our problem. And so that really got me thinking. And so I did my own little independent survey of all the people that I could find from Chicago. And I just asked them one question. Tell me why you love Chicago so much. And they told me in a million ways and in a million different voices, they told me the locally owned businesses. Now think about it. They said, oh, God, I love Chicago, all the restaurants and chefs, locally owned businesses. They said, ooh, in Chicago, I had the same barber for 40 years. Locally owned businesses. They said, oh, in my hometown, I used to be able to pop into my favorite booth at the cafe and they'd shout out, hey, Steve, you want the regular? Locally owned businesses, right? So they even said things like, I bank at the same bank my great-grandparents banked at. Again, deep roots in that economy. And so oftentimes people leave Chicago and they're so rooted to that community, they move into another community and they throw that local behavior out the window and they end up going to whoever happens to dominate the real estate at the intersection, which is the big brands. And then they wonder why they don't feel connected here. So locally, my little informal survey was trumped by the soul of the community, which was done by the Knight Foundation, which showed that people who love their place are more likely to vote, to volunteer, to give charitably, and to pay their taxes without complaining. Now, this is critically important that this people who love their place are people who know who they're doing business with. That going to the dog groomers or sourcing from a local company that actually makes the deliveries to your business actually makes you feel good and roots you in that community and makes you care more about the local issues and more likely to get engaged in the local issues. Okay, so that's connection to place, and that's one of the reasons that local is so important. Now we're going to talk about jobs and economics. So the first thing I want to do is, this is my first survey. If I could activate this first polling question. I believe that Starbucks is actually the best chain out there, right? And if we were in person, we'd start talking about Starbucks and probably a quarter of the audience would take their Starbucks cup and quietly stick it under the desk because you think I'm going to pick on Starbucks. Not so quick. All right. I think that Starbucks is the best chain model out there. And I'd like to know why you think it is too. Here's the reasons up on the screen. Customer service. I hear this all the time. Great training programs. They pay for the employee health care. They don't demand subsidies, all of the above, or C and D combined. So I'm going to move on and we're going to start talking about the economy, how it actually works. And I'll circle back in a moment on that. So on the left-hand side of your screen represents 15 Starbucks locations in your community or in your state. On the right-hand side of the screen represents 15 sort of randomly collected independent coffee shops and their logos, okay? So we're looking at two different examples of businesses that can be operating in one economy. So the two reasons that I personally think that Starbucks are the best chain model out there. Number one, they pay for the healthcare of their employees. Now, why is that important? Okay. About 20 years ago, the big chain stores scratched their head and they said, you know, this darn employee healthcare is our largest expense. This is our number one expense. And they suddenly realized if they just stopped paying for the healthcare of the majority of their employees, those employees would then seek healthcare through the state programs. Okay, who's paying for that? Hopefully, you know the answer to that. You are, I am, and you are. In your local economy, whoever's on the state healthcare program, we're footing the bill for that. So imagine how smart that was in a board meeting at a chain company at a big, huge corporate level to realize if you just stop paying for the healthcare, the taxpayers will pick it up. Wow, saved them a lot of money, didn't it? That was great. Well, Starbucks doesn't do that. They pay for the healthcare of their employees. Awesome, good on them. Second reason, they're not in the business of subsidies. What does that mean to me and you? Okay, so I'll use an example like Cabela's. You may be familiar with Cabela's. Most people mistakenly think they're in the business of outdoor fishing tackle, clothes, things like that. That's not their primary business. Their primary business is subsidies. So they send a team in to meet with the economic developer people in your region, and they pitch what is the value that Cabela's is going to bring, right? In my state, if you can imagine, you might have heard of something called the Grand Canyon, maybe one of the 7 wonders of the world. It's in my state. Cabela's claimed they were going to be the second largest tourist attraction in my state after the Grand Canyon, right? I don't know anyone who would believe that. However, it was on the front page of the Arizona Republic. So this is a really big pitch, right? This is a big promise. They're going to be the #2 driver of tourism in our state. Okay, that never happened, but they used this narrative to be able to command a very large subsidy. Now, Cabela's averages $35 million across the country per store in subsidies. Here in Arizona, they got a $68 million subsidy for one retail location. Now, let's look at this a little more deeply. Okay, a subsidy, that means you walk in and part of that subsidy was what's called a sales tax abatement. That means you pay for the tax on the tent that you just bought. And typically that goes into the coffers to pay for libraries, parks, fire departments, even a piece of it goes to education in my state, etc. No. For 10 years, they signed a deal. They get to keep those sales taxes. They collect them and they keep them. They don't pay them into coffers, right? So are you outraged? I hope so. You should be. In any case, back to the slide. Starbucks doesn't do that. They show up and they do business their own way. Okay, great. They pay for their own way. Love it. All right. So now let's look at the answers that came back in the survey. Let's take a look at what you all thought for the reasons Starbucks was the best chain model out there. I understand they're going to show it up here on the screen for us, but I'll keep talking until they do. Starbucks, back to them doing business. Now let's imagine, okay, I can see it really small at the bottom here. Most people, let's see, well, I can't see it, it's too small. In any case, I don't think many people guessed what my answer was, which was C and D, which is they pay for the healthcare of their employees and they're not in the business of subsidies. Good on them. So now you're there and you're ready to spend your money on a latte at Starbucks. Now ask yourself, how many graphic designers does Starbucks hire in Alaska, in the state of Alaska, because they do business there and they do a lot of business there? How many graphic designers? The answer is none. How about website developers? Do they come in and hire any local website developers that are unique to Alaska? They do not. How about payroll service providers or accountants or attorneys, right? It's a long list. Those are business professional companies, and the answer is none. On the other side of the screen, 15 independent coffee shops hired 15 graphic designers to do those logos, 15 website developers, 15 payroll providers may have a gig or accountants. Right? That represents dollars moving through a circular economy. And it's critically important that we understand how the dollars move. So remember the saying, smart money comes back to you, right? And then we could talk about the third time the dollar moves through the economy when, let's say, the janitorial supply company keeps the offices clean of the accounting firm, and the accounting firm is only there because the local businesses hire them. So it's critically important that you remember this, when you're spending money, it should come back to you. Now, I was giving a talk a couple of months ago to a conference of graphic designers. And at this point, imagine pre-COVID audience, there was a woman in the front, she smacked herself in the forehead. loud enough that I could hear it. And I was like shocked. And I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "Yeah, I'm just mad at myself." And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Because I'm listening to you talk. I have a graphic design firm. I used to have 7 employees. Today I have 5. And it looks like tomorrow I'm going to have 4. And it never occurred to me until right now that I've been spending all of my money with companies that are never going to hire my firm." So this sort of realization that she was spending all of her money with these big corporate entities that were never going to look for a small graphic design firm, and that she better actually go out into her community and create relationships, those relationships being with people that may actually want to hire a small graphic design firm. So now we could blow this model up across the country, 30,000 Starbucks locations, and they're still only going to have 1 graphic design firm, 1 website development firm. And by the way, that graphic designer has his feet on the desk right now because they're not going to create a new logo. They're not going to replace that logo anytime soon, right? So there's not a whole lot of activity happening over there. But this model is broken, and it actually limits the number of jobs available in your communities. And I'm not talking about baristas. Hopefully you understand. I am talking about business professional services, companies and people who are operating as business professionals. So we know now that for every 2 jobs a chain store creates, that 3 local jobs are actually going to be eliminated. So this study was done most recently, and it shows that for every $10 million we spend in the US in independent retailers, we create and sustain 110 jobs. For the same $10 million we spend at chain retailers, we create and sustain only 50 jobs. Now, this study is relatively recent, and it shows that we spend $10 million on Amazon. We create only 14 jobs, create and sustain only 14 jobs. Now, Amazon's not going away tomorrow, but it's critically important that we understand we have choices to make, and we need to be able to make very smart choices that are related to how our local economy works. So what we did at Local First Arizona is we talked about creating a 10% shift. If you ask somebody to do something realistic, it will actually motivate them to do more. So in a community with about 600,000 people, if everyone there shifted 10% of their spending, it would create $130 million new dollars recirculating in that economy. And it would create 1,600 brand new jobs. Again, $130 million new dollars recirculating, 1,600 brand new jobs. So hopefully you're starting to realize we actually run the economy. The economy is ours to own. We just need to make the choices that have the biggest impact on our local economy. So this is not, again, just me, and this is not something that's even new. 11 years ago, the Harvard Business Review was talking about supporting small, independently owned businesses. So I'm going to just hit on some strategies for growing a local economy. Of course, there are more. But if you think of economic development as a 5-pointed star, there should be a comprehensive look at economic development. Number 1 is investing in incubators. Number 2 is investing in startups and making sure that incubators have a running start to get out the door and starting new businesses. The third way to grow your economy is business retention and making sure that your existing business community has the resources they need. And then there's business expansion, which helps your existing business community grow and add jobs. And then the final one is business attraction. That is a piece of it, but it is a myth to think that the only way to grow your economy is to import jobs or companies from somewhere else. Generally, in economic development here in Arizona, for many years, 90% of our budget was aimed at business attraction. And that is the most expensive way and the most inefficient way to grow your local economy. The other 4, incubators, startups, business retention, and business expansion, are far superior strategies, right? We know that job creation in America is happening with small business startups and small and mid-sized business expansion. So we need to invest our money there. We need to reduce our economic leakage, making sure that we're looking at our local economy and we're spending our money as wisely as we can, keeping it recirculating in the local economy. And we need to leverage local talent, hire that local graphic design firm, hire that local website development company, whatever that looks like. I know that Alaska is better than anyone at tourism and events. That's a way to drive new dollars into your community. But think about the critical role your local businesses play in tourism. That is the face of your community. You want to invest in your corridor and cluster those businesses, and then you want to work extra hard on supply chain development and localizing that supply chain development as much as you can. So it's important for us to all agree and understand that our systems are broken in this country and really around the world, but specifically I'm talking about in the US economy. And our inequities, specifically our racial wealth gap, is accelerating at a very, it's widening at an accelerated pace, if you will. So this is an idea that I really want you to take away. Local businesses, we need them more than they need us. A lot of people see Local First Arizona and they think I'm going to come on and say, boo-hoo, you all need to support local businesses even when they're not great. Well, let me tell you, I can't tell you to go local if local's not great. So part of my job is working with the small business. Those of you who own small businesses, let me just tell you one story. Go the extra mile. I'm going to let you read all these bullets yourself. They're all critically important. I have a woman that I teach classes with on strengthening small businesses, right? And she tells a great story. She lives in a rural town. She was outraged one time going home at night. She said, Kimber, I needed the most basic grocery list. It was like cheese, bread, milk, and eggs. I went into our local grocery store and they didn't have any of it. And I was outraged. I went home and I left a nasty gram. I sent the store manager an outrage note. You call yourself a grocer? She said, she went on and said a nasty note. Now, what do you think that grocer did 45 minutes later when he got that note? He got that email. He showed up on her doorstep with her groceries. He showed up with bread, cheese, milk, and eggs. And he said, I am so sorry. I had 3 people call in sick. I had the merchandise, no one to put it on the floor. I tried to stop everyone at the door and I missed you. Now, do you think she's a customer for life? There's no doubt. She's telling the story 3 years later. I'm telling the story 3 years after that. That is the level of customer service at which local businesses are going to need to offer in order to compete. And we can do it. I'm a total fan. I am a believer that local business can do this. And we also want to make sure that our local businesses are telling their story. Critically important that they're telling their story. We have a tire shop in Local First Arizona. Their website used to say, we sell tires. Nah, that's what they do. That's not why they do it. If you're a local business owner, tell your story. People want to know who you are. That same tire shop, those owners, husband and wife, their son was killed in a head-on collision when somebody's tire blew out. That company, they sell peace of mind for you and your family. They don't sell tires, they sell peace of mind. There's a difference, and people want to know who they're doing business with. So tell your story. So it's also important to note that now I've outlined connection to place, the important role local businesses play. Local business has been distinctly disadvantaged by multiple decades of support for a globalized economy. So all of these economic policies favor global over local. And it's not just a level playing field. It's an equal playing field. And we need to battle just to get an equal playing field. So local business has limited access to capital. We have too much money in the big banks. The big banks do not have relationships with our local businesses by and large. Okay. There's been support for monopolies, this, unyielding growth. It's really important to understand that is fueled by policies that enable that kind of monopolistic behavior. We need to break up companies. We need to diversify our economy. We have those existing antitrust laws. We just haven't been enforcing them. Low bid wins. It's not an effective strategy because you're not factoring in the true value of a contract. You're only looking at the short term. I'll tell you, the cheapest price is costing a fortune if you're not thinking about what is the value of that contract. We need to measure success by health and well-being and not just growth. And we need to recognize all the corporate protections that are out there, the lack of accountability. We need to relocalize our economy and coexist in a fair and equitable manner. So we need to enforce those antitrust laws. We need to get our money into community banks and credit unions that support our local economy. We need to look at alternative ownership models, really important. And my colleague, Michael Schumann, is going to be talking about cooperative models and alternative investments, both of which are really important to growing our local economy. So what have we learned? Case studies are critical at Local First Arizona. We've done economic studies. We have leveraged the media like nobody's business, getting the word out and making every person feel that they can be a part of the local economy. Entrepreneurial thinking is essential to making a local economy work. And then systems thinking. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what I mean about systems thinking in a moment. So this is a quick look at an economic study we did looking at the state of Arizona's procurement policy. We mandate low bid wins. We're one of only a handful of states that still does it our way. But we awarded a $5 million contract to Staples because they bid the cheapest price. But when we dug in and we looked at Staples versus OfficeMax versus WIS, which is a homegrown Arizona company, and they're plenty large enough to manage a contract like this. They're the largest one in the Western US. We look at the impact of the $5 million spent in Staples versus OfficeMax versus WIS. WIS hires other local economy or local businesses in the local economy, which keeps dollars and jobs here. They give back to our local charities at a much higher rate. If you look at Staples, all you have to do is look. They actually pack and process our orders in Los Angeles and ship them here via FedEx. Not a single job created with our state's contract. Those are our taxpayer dollars that they are in turn spending in our community. And I, for one, would like to see those spent considering the long-term impacts on our local economy, not just the cheapest price in the short term. In reality, on a $5 million contract, we could have spent an extra $20,000 more with WIST, and think about the local economy, how it would have been impacted, the number of additional jobs we would have supported. It's not a big number. Another example, case study, here's a local company that they chose to work with us to source more locally. We got them from spending 40% locally all the way up to 82% locally. And then we came in and measured, what does it mean? There were two key findings. The first, they employ 518 people. That's great. That's how many people wake up and put their pants on every day and work for Copper Point Mutual. We proved they were indirectly supporting 3,600 Arizona jobs by the way they were sourcing. Indirect support of jobs is critically important to understand. Number two, they have a $100 million budget. That's how much they spent, but it had a $500 million positive impact on Arizona's economy at the end of the day. And these studies are on our website, by the way, if you're interested. So now I'm going to get you one last thing before we break for a quick question or two. Tourism study. We were hired, this is a systems change question, and I want you to think about it. We were hired, small rural town in Arizona, won best small town in America 2 years in a row. They came in and they simply asked, help us figure out why our tourism numbers are declining. Okay, so great, I took that job. I went in, I started asking questions, and then I started learning. First thing, their Yelp reviews went from an average 4.75 stars down to 3.25 stars in a 6-month span. Wow, that is a significant drop. Lots of negative reviews, lots of people having a bad experience. First thing I did, I went and I started talking to the local restaurants. And they said, yeah, things are going well, they're flat, but man, am I having a hard time hiring. Can't find any local talent to save my life. So I thought, wonder why that is. Started asking questions. Turns out Airbnb had moved into their economy. In that community, they had taken the affordable housing and they had turned it into short-term rentals. Bisbee, this town was forever, since I was a little girl, it was an artist community. When they got rid of their affordable housing, so went the artists, and those artists had to move away. Well, it turns out those artists were the servers and the frontline retailers that allowed them to have the lifestyle of being an artist. That was their workforce. They displaced their workforce. And at the end of the day, they weren't having a tourism problem. They were having an affordable housing problem, and this is not uncommon in America. So I use that as an example. The answer here is E. The lack of affordable housing was the primary cause that led into all these other challenges that they were having. So it's important when you think about strengthening your local economy that you really work to get to the root of the problem and think about systems. And my final note, when we talk about dollars moving through the economy, really critical that you think about this scenario. City of Phoenix, they announced they had $1.2 million that they wanted to invest to feed COVID impacted families. I read it in the paper. And I called up my friends at the City of Phoenix and I said, I am begging you, let me run that money through our economy. This is at the height of COVID. Let me run it through our economy. And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, don't just take 1.2 million and hire one big company to make those meals. Let me take that money and hire my local farms and hire my local restaurants to make those meals. We took the same amount of money, we produced the same amount of meals, and we supported hundreds of jobs and companies right in the middle of a pandemic. We didn't spend any more money, we didn't produce any less meals, we put our economy to work. Now this story, this should be everywhere. This should be normal news. This is how the economy works. But instead, it's a rare occasion. Typically, we take that money and we just say, hey, you big company, Aramark, whoever, can you make these meals? And we'll distribute the meals. And we feel good about that. Not good enough. We can do much better than that. We just have to understand how our economy works. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our moderator to see if there's a question or two that I can answer for you before we go. Dana, I'm not sure if you're talking to me, but you're muted.
So we do have some questions.
Great.
What spending habits do you think are easiest to shift?
Well, I'm going to take that as an individual. And I don't know the Alaska economy that well, but it's about sitting down and look at last month's spending, how you spent your money, and think about where there's local substitutes. You know, we call it import substitution. So if you got a haircut, did you do it at a locally owned barbershop or boutique? If you went clothing shopping, is there a local alternative to that? If you got an oil change, is there a local alternative to that? And I like to remind people, even in a big grocery store that's not local, there are probably still local products in that grocery store you can choose, thereby localizing where you can.
Great. So another question we have is, what can we do about overcoming the small consumer markets we have locally for more products and services?
Investing in entrepreneurship, developing an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So investing, if you have a small business incubator, looking at what resources and help they need, checking to see that you have affordable building stock, affordable spaces for small businesses to start, developing a culture of support and opportunity for the businesses that start, right? So often we want more local businesses, and then one opens up and nobody pays attention to it until they're getting ready to go out of business, and everybody goes, oh, they're going out of business. No, make it a habit of investing in small business entrepreneurship and startups.
Great, thank you. We have one more question.
Sure.
So low bid wins is often an easy heuristic for people to understand that the government is being prudent. How can you overcome the short-term political mindset?
Well, I think using examples of the long-term value. So an example that, we did economic studies, which obviously is a big step, but just simply asking a question, I'll use this as an example. We had a local company here that provided office furniture to our state. And the state announced they were going to move to a company called Walsh Brothers, which had just been purchased by Target. So essentially they were saying, we're getting rid of this company and we're going to start purchasing from Target. And the local business owner called and said, if I lose this contract, I'm going to have to lay off 20 people tomorrow. And so I quickly called the state of Arizona because I'm somewhat connected there. I was able to find out that Target undercut Goodman's, I'm not making this up, by $22,300. So for $22,300, we lost 20 jobs.
Wow.
Just start looking at the facts and talking about them. I mean, are we saying then that an Arizona job is worth, less than a couple $1,000s? No, clearly we shouldn't be saying that, but this is what short-term thinking does. So look at the implications.
Great, thank you. We have another question. So can you talk about the concept of extraction? A chain will only be interested in entering a new market if they think they can make a profit. So extracting value.
Yes. I don't know if you saw a movie one time that Daniel Day-Lewis was in called There Will Be Blood. And you can envision where his neighbor said, okay, I'm going to sell you my land. You asked if you could have the oil in my land a few years ago, and I finally came around to it, and I'm going to sell you my land. And Daniel Day-Lewis says, too late. I stuck a straw in it, and I sucked all the oil out of it, and then his land wasn't valuable anymore. And I always envision that. So extractive economy means you put a business into an economy that provides primarily low-wage jobs, and the wealth, the dollars that are earned by that company are then used to pay shareholders or corporate leaders that don't live in that economy. And those dollars don't come back. Once they've left your economy, they don't come back. So you've essentially said, take our profits and invest them elsewhere. We're not worthy, right? So what we want to do is command a conversation that says, when dollars are earned in this economy, then they should stay in this economy. And that's the dynamic that we're battling here is, could we strike a balance where those dollars come back and are invested? I also think it's important, one last thing I will say, is that we start really thinking, holistically. There's a wonderful book called I think it's called Winners Take All, that really outlines, and I won't name any corporate entities, but if a corporate entity has been producing unhealthy food for a century, and that unhealthy food is directly tied to diabetes and obesity and other health-related issues. It is sugar-coated, maybe even it's been tied in some way to cancer. If that company then in turn comes back and says, well, we're going to invest in playgrounds for children, then do we automatically give them a free pass and simply say that's okay, you can continue manufacturing that food as long as you give us playgrounds, right? Really important to start thinking about what companies bring in the bigger picture and how we can hold them accountable to being true to the true health and well-being of our communities. So thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you. We have one last question. So can you share more about Local First Arizona's greatest successes with changing consumer behavior?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Oh, let me.
Ina, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Can you share a little bit more about Local First Arizona's greatest successes with changing consumer behavior?
Oh, sure. We changed the City of Phoenix's procurement policy, and they source an additional $20 to $25 million from local companies now that they didn't used to. That would be one example. I don't want to go on, but we are the largest local business organization in the country, and so we have a good number of reports and measurable successes. Please email me directly, and I can send you studies if you'd like.
Great, thank you. The questions just keep rolling in. I think we do have time to take another question.
Brian gave me the. Are we sure there's more time? Okay, I'm open.
Yes,
okay.
We have time.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay. Can you please relate these principles to the Juneau visitor industry dominated by the cruise ship industry?
Yeah, I would be more than happy to have that conversation. I think that there needs to be a real analysis that looks at That's a really tricky question. Again, wading in your territory, not mine. I can say in our community, we like to have a conversation around equity. So if a company is really doing exceptionally well in an environment that is uniquely ours, then some of the profitability needs to also remain here. Of course, they're going to be profitable, but the question remains, to what end do we allow our economies to be dominated by a corporate structure that is not accountable to local communities? That is the question. That's a question for Alaska really to answer for themselves. But I know here I'm demanding a broader question and inviting a broad group of stakeholders to really analyze some of these contracts.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Kimber. That was enlightening. It's interesting to see how much impact there could be with just a little shift to local spending.
Well, that's it. I think it's important for everyone to know that I'm not here to say, you know, you can only purchase locally knitted socks and they're available on Tuesdays at one store and they're only open from 2 to 4. I'm not trying to wreck your life. I'm trying to help you understand your role within a local economy and what things you can do to really be mindful of how you are supporting jobs and opportunities. And that's the thing. The more you don't spend locally, the more you're saying it's really okay if my children and their children have less opportunities, because we're literally eliminating jobs in our local economy. So this is about getting back in the driver's seat and owning our own economy.
Well, with that, thank you so much, Kimber. It was a pleasure to have you at the summit.
And I hope everyone enjoys the days. These are going to be great conversations. And if I can be helpful in the future, please reach out to me directly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.